I perished at the hands of the one I trusted most, my husband, Michael.
Clinging desperately to the railing, I've given you everything you wanted. Why are you doing this?
Someone as malicious as you is actually afraid of passing away.
Did you ever think about how terrified Emily was when you pushed her off the cliff?
She just wanted to be by my side. What did she do wrong?
It should have been you who fell off that cliff back then. Just let me go.
He pried my fingers off the railing one by one, smiling as he watched me fall. As I plummeted, I closed my eyes in despair, my thoughts drifting back to a few years ago.
Emily, or rather, Emily, was a girl I had saved from her father.
I was out on an errand when I heard cries for help coming from a narrow alley. Entering the maze-like alley, I saw a girl struggling to escape from a man. She ran towards me but was kicked in the knee, breaking her leg.
Seeing her crawl towards me in terror, I couldn't bear it and stepped between her and the man.
The man glanced at me.
She's just an ungrateful wretch. Don't be fooled by her. Just pretend you didn't see us and walk away.
I looked down at the girl, her gentle eyes and battered body making her look pitiful.
So, I chose to save her.
I spent a large sum of money to sever her ties with her father, hired a psychologist to heal her emotional scars, and used my connections to find top doctors to treat her injury.
I gave her care and money, but in return, she slept with my husband and repeatedly sowed discord between me and my family.
Later, she tricked me into climbing a mountain, intending to push me off a cliff. In the end, she met her own fate and died at the bottom of the cliff.
Before I died, I thought of my kind-hearted parents. To ensure I wouldn't be mistreated in my husband's family, they had handed over the company to me early. But before I was taken to the psychiatric hospital, Michael tricked me into signing over my assets.
As the only daughter of my family, now dead, my parents wouldn't even have anyone to see them off. I regretted trusting the wrong person. My vision blurred, and I fell into darkness. When I regained consciousness, I found myself standing at the entrance of an alley.
I looked around and realized this was the place where I had saved Emily in my previous life.
Soon, a familiar voice echoed from within. I clenched my phone tightly.
Dad, it hurts. Stop hitting me. Help, is anyone there?
You still dare call me Dad? Did you think of me as your father when you did those things?
I took a few steps forward and saw the scene in the alley. Just like before, Emily was being beaten by her father.
This time, I didn't step in to save her. Instead, I retreated to a corner.
After her father had beaten her enough, I called the police. As I was getting into the police car, I felt a gaze on me. Turning around, I saw it was Emily. She hadn't expected me to look back, and her eyes were filled with resentment. It turned out I had misjudged her from the very beginning. The alley was dimly lit, casting long shadows on the walls.
Dad, it hurts. Stop hitting me. Help, is anyone there?
You still dare call me Dad? Did you think of me as your father when you did those things?
I took a few steps forward and saw the scene. Emily was being punished by her father. This time, I didn't intervene. Instead, I retreated to a corner. After her father had left, I called the police. As I was getting into the police car, I felt a gaze on me. Turning around, I saw it was Emily. Her eyes were filled with resentment. My mom coldly laughed after hearing it.
A misunderstanding? If we hadn't accidentally walked in, things would have already gone too far. And now you tell us it's a misunderstanding?
This girl is Emily, a student David has been sponsoring. There must be some misunderstanding.
Anna, it really is a misunderstanding. Remember, you even saved her from an alley that day.
At that moment, a voice came from behind.
David?
A flash of panic crossed David's face as he quickly went to greet the man.
Mr. Sue, what brings you here?
Something this big happens on my turf, and you think I wouldn't know?
David was at a loss for words. My parents' expressions softened when they saw the newcomer.
Sophia, what are you doing here?
I raised an eyebrow while in my mom's arms. I hadn't expected my parents to know David's boss.
I've been here for many years. This hotel is one of my properties. Uncle John, Aunt Mary, let me take you somewhere else. This isn't a good place to talk.
Following her gaze, we looked outside and saw a crowd gathered, some even recording with their phones. On the way to the room, I was still crying and didn't notice Sophia clenching her fist by her side.
What happened?
My parents sighed and recounted the whole story. David tried to argue but was silenced by Sophia's cold stare. Once we arrived, Sophia didn't leave but instead sat on the sofa.
What do you plan to do?
I wiped my tears and said,
What David did is undeniable. I want a divorce. David leaves with nothing, and Emily has to return the money spent on her. I have the right to reclaim our joint assets.
Sophia seemed a bit surprised by my resolve, given that I was known among David's colleagues as someone deeply in love. Rain or shine, I would bring David meals, treat his colleagues to afternoon tea, go shopping with Linda, and buy gifts for Robert. But he described my affection as an invisible shackle, suffocating him. Naturally, the Zhang family disagreed. Linda and Robert didn't want to lose a wealthy daughter-in-law, and David still wanted to use me as a stepping stone in his career. At that moment, the clock struck 11. Tired of arguing, I took my parents to the room I had booked for them. Sophia walked out with us and promised to help me as much as she could. I didn't understand and thought she was joking. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer to file for divorce. Remembering how difficult Linda was, I felt a bit troubled. But to my surprise, after just one night, Linda didn't put up much of a fight and even agreed to David leaving with nothing.
David is actually quite lucky. In a few days, he'll be promoted to department head. Some people just can't enjoy good fortune.
What a joke. After marrying into the Zhang family, I went from not lifting a finger to cooking and cleaning for them. If Emily wants this fortune, she can have it. A few days later, I ran into David and Emily at a jewelry store. Seeing her slightly rounded belly, I realized she was already expecting. My eyes flickered as I recalled something from my previous life that I had almost forgotten. At that moment, I was even more eager than Linda for the child's arrival. Because I wanted to see what would happen to Emily when the truth came out, and how Linda, who was obsessed with having a grandson, would react. Narrator, tone, shouting, Dad, it hurts, stop hitting me.
Help, is anyone there?
The man's furious voice rang out.
Emily's father, Tone, angry you still dare call me Dad? Did you think of me as your father when you did those things?
I took a few steps forward and saw the scene in the alley. Just like before, Emily was being beaten by her father. This time, I didn't step in to save her. Instead, I retreated to a corner. After her father had beaten her enough, I called the police. As I was getting into the police car, I felt a gaze on me. Turning around, I saw it was Emily. She hadn't expected me to look back, and her eyes were filled with resentment. It turned out I had misjudged her from the very beginning. After Mary found out that Emily had gotten involved with a wealthy man, she frequently came to our house to ask for money. When she didn't get any, she would cause a scene at the door, drawing the attention of the entire neighborhood. David, being someone who cared about his reputation, quickly squandered his savings. By then, the deadline I had given them to move out had arrived.
I brought people to reclaim the house. Linda, who had gotten used to living in a villa, didn't want to move and put on the same manipulative face she had before.
Anna, if you give us the house, I might reluctantly agree to let David be with you. But if you want to reconcile, you need to have a child first. Only then can you move back in. If you really miss David, you could buy the villa next door. That way, you can see him every day when you come over to cook for us.
Your son is worthless. Only you see him as a treasure. You want me to be a free maid? Dream on. Now, get out of my house.
Linda tried to continue arguing, but I had the security guards throw them out along with their belongings. This house held too many unpleasant memories. I didn't want to live there anymore. So, I contacted a real estate agent to help me sell it. Around this time, the detective I had hired to investigate Emily had some news. Looking at her social network diagram, I was astonished. She had nearly 10 ambiguous relationships. Her private life was far more complicated than I had imagined. Her ambiguous partners were about to get married. How could I not inform them? Fearing they would continue to be deceived, I did another good deed. Shortly after the wedding began, several of my friends from out of town arrived at the venue.
You've been through so much. Why didn't you tell us? Should I let my parents know so they can make sure he can't continue in this industry?
He's just a scumbag. I can handle it myself. No need to trouble your parents.
Don't forget what you promised me yesterday.
They raised their hands and swore not to interfere. When they saw David, they acted cheerfully, making him think they knew nothing. Before long, a group of men arrived at the wedding, claiming to be Emily's good friends, there to attend her wedding. Seeing familiar faces, I smirked, picked up a drink, and sipped it slowly, waiting for the show to begin. Emily, feeling proud, thought they were there out of jealousy and greeted them warmly. Little did she know, they had something big planned. The LED screen, which was supposed to show her and David's loving moments, instead displayed her chat logs with these men. There were messages calling them honey and asking for money, the most recent one being just 2 days ago. The Zhang family's reputation was utterly ruined. David, now humiliated, quickly dismissed the guests, and the wedding was called off. That evening, David invited several executives and my friends to dinner, ostensibly to apologize but actually to network. Recently, Sophia had been very cold towards him. Combined with his poor reputation at the company, he knew he wouldn't pass the Democratic recommendation. So, he hoped to secure some deals tonight to get promoted. During the toast, my friends dropped their pretense, casually knocked over their glasses, and pointed at him, cursing.
David, when you were pursuing Anna, you said you'd love her forever and never betray her. But what did you do? You used her family as a stepping stone and cheated on her. How dare you?
This is between my wife and me. It's none of your business. Anna, are you just going to let outsiders insult me like this?
Sorry, but to Anna, you're the outsider now. You'd better not show up in front of us again, or we'll beat you every time we see you.
With that, my friend pulled me away, and Sophia leisurely followed us. Seeing Sophia leave, the others knew David was now a lost cause. They never made unprofitable deals, so they all got up and left. My friends and I waited in a hidden spot for David to come out. After a long while, we saw him staggering out, reeking of alcohol.
What a night.
When he reached a place without surveillance cameras, a sack was thrown over his head, and fists started raining down on him. I took the opportunity to kick him a few times, his cries of pain creating a symphony in the alley.
Stop. Please.
My friends were skilled fighters, they could inflict internal injuries without leaving visible marks or beat someone black and blue without breaking any bones. David belonged to the latter category. Bruised and battered, he felt too humiliated to show his face and took several days off work. He couldn't swallow his pride and suspected my friends, but reporting it to the police was useless, they found nothing, and he just ended up getting beaten for nothing.
This is all Emily's fault. She's been nothing but trouble since she came into our lives.
The more they had liked her initially, the more they despised her now. If it weren't for the fact that she was carrying a young family child, Linda would never have let her off. After many years, I spent these past few days hanging out with friends, and Sophia was often around. Today was no different. My friends were dancing in the club, leaving just me and him in the booth.
If I fire David, would that make you feel better?
I sneered. If I hadn't used my memories from my past life to avoid risks, I would still be at his mercy. How could losing a job satisfy my hatred?
He can't be fired.
Hearing these 3 words, Sophia's face turned darker than ink.
After all this, you still like him.
I gave him a puzzled look, not understanding how he came to that conclusion. It wasn't until I laid out my entire plan that his smile returned. I thought to myself, this person is really unpredictable. After my friends left, Sophia still came to find me as usual. That day, just after he left, David intercepted me.
Anna, you were so determined to divorce me just to be with Mr. Sue. I didn't expect you to be such a gold digger.
I didn't expect him to be so shameless, turning the tables so effortlessly. I gave him a cold look and warned.
If you don't want to lose your job, go ahead and slander your boss.
David looked around, relieved to see no sign of Sophia.
I know it was you who spread those rumors about me cheating during our marriage. You did all this out of jealousy, wanting my attention, didn't you? If you give me the house and money, and put in a good word for me with Mr. Sue, I'll take you back once I get promoted.
I laughed in anger. Knowing it was all my doing, he still thought I was fighting for his attention, thinking he was some kind of prize. I pointed to the top floor and gave a malicious smile.
If you want money, sure. Jump from the top floor, and in memory of our past, I'll pay for your funeral and give you a proper send-off. That way, you'll have both the money and the house. Don't worry, I keep my promises. I won't let you lie here like a pile of trash.
David's face turned pale and then flushed.
Anna, you have more money than you can spend. Why not help me? Have you forgotten who gave you warmth when you were isolated?
How could I forget? If it weren't for you forcing them to isolate me, how would my high school life have been so colorful?
He took a few steps back, his face full of fear.
How do you know? No, you're slandering me.
People who do bad things can't hide forever.
Before I could chase him away, he fled in panic. In the past, I was blinded by love and never thought about why those who were initially friendly started isolating me. I just assumed it was my fault. After being reborn, I investigated the events of those years and uncovered the truth. I called Sophia and another person, telling them the plan was in motion. After her father had vented his rage, I called the police. As I was getting into the police car, I felt a piercing gaze on me. Turning around, I saw it was Emily, her eyes burning with resentment. It was then I realized I had misjudged her from the start. The next day, before John and Mary left, I requested they hand over a project to me. This project would be my instrument of revenge against David. David, aware that Sophia wouldn't keep him around, began seeking alliances with her competitors. Despite their rivalry, they could set aside their differences for mutual gain.
Steal Sophia's core technology, and I'll make you the general manager.
The temptation was too great for David, who loathed Sophia. Just as he was about to succeed, Sophia walked into the office with the competitor. David hoped for protection, but was betrayed instead.
I only demand compensation. Pay up.
Watching the live broadcast, I clapped in satisfaction. David had tricked me into signing my property away in a previous life. Now, it was his turn to be outsmarted. Desperate, David borrowed money from everywhere, even approaching Emily's stepfather, James. Thinking about James' shady background, I devised a bold plan. I approached James with a bag of money, expressing my concerns.
Please, pass this money to David. Emily dislikes me, and I fear she'll misunderstand. I can't bear to see David suffer. If you help, I'll give you $1,000.
I can do it. If there's anything like this in the future, find me.
Sure.
Predictably, the greedy James kept the money and arranged for loan sharks to lend money to David. I pretended not to know. With Sophia's debt still unpaid, loan sharks came knocking. The David family dared not go home, sneaking back late at night. Emily, seeking solace and care, went to James' house. My people followed. James, flush with money and with Emily back, started boasting after drinking.
Keep David in check and drain his family dry.
He and Emily slept in the same bed while her mother was out. With evidence in hand, I sent a copy to Linda. Furious, she stormed to James' house with Robert.
How dare you?
She kicked Emily's stomach hard, knocking her to the ground. Emily lost the baby, blood staining her dress. Enraged, James grabbed a knife and attacked Linda. Robert, terrified, hid until it was over. Onlookers called the police. James tried to implicate me, claiming I hinted at the loan shark scheme. Under police questioning, I produced a recording to prove my innocence. Emily, frail and broken, came to me, her face pale as paper.
Anna, I was wrong. I was blinded by jealousy. Please save me one more time.
When did you come back?
During the incident.
Not kicking you while you're down is already my mercy. Why would I keep a traitor by my side?
Emily's plea fell on deaf ears as I turned away, leaving her in despair. A narrow alley, the sound of crying and shouting echoed between the walls.
Dad, it hurts. Stop hitting me. Help! Is anyone there?
You still dare call me Dad? Did you think of me as your father when you did those things?
I took a few steps forward and saw the scene in the alley. Emily was being beaten by her father. This time, I didn't step in to save her. Instead, I retreated to a corner. After her father had beaten her enough, I called the police. As I was getting into the police car, I felt a gaze on me. Turning around, I saw it was Emily. She hadn't expected me to look back, and her eyes were filled with resentment. It turned out I had misjudged her from the very beginning. Emily shrank against the wall, trembling. Her father's furious voice echoed down the narrow alley.
Dad, it hurts. Stop hitting me. Help! Is anyone there?
The man's voice roared with anger.
You still dare call me Dad? Did you think of me as your father when you did those things?
I cautiously took a few steps forward and saw the scene. Emily was being beaten by her father, just like before. This time, I didn't step in to save her. Instead, I retreated to a corner and waited. After her father had vented his fury, I called the police. As I was getting into the police car, I felt a gaze on me. Turning around, I saw it was Emily. She hadn't expected me to look back, and her eyes were filled with resentment. It turned out I had misjudged her from the very beginning.